Okay. Setting up the stream in 3, 2, 1. Hey, everybody. You are watching and listening to the We Are Rizin podcast. This is your host, Andrew Benjamin. I'm joined by my just woken up co-host, Jay Christian Gary from Focus Fights.
Hey, y'all. How's it going? I hope to never spend another late night past 1 a.m. again after this show.
You sound like me on a bender on Friday or Saturday nights. So
Exactly. But again, late nights notwithstanding, we have a man that's basically crammed filled with late night study sessions over in Canada, in Toronto or Brampton, Ontario specifically. He's Jack Wannan of Knockdown News. How are you, sir?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's great to finally be back on this podcast. We got a lot to discuss today. We have a busy weekend ahead. I know you guys touched on some of it before, but we got this trigger show to discuss, so I'm excited to do that.
Oh, yes, of course we do, of course. And you know what? Here's the weird thing about it. Here's the kicker. Did y'all know that this is going to be the first of a back-to-back weekend of 2 weekends chock full of action? Because not only do we got these two Rizin events happening back-to-back nights, but we also got Bellator 277 taking place in between those Rizin shows, as well as a back-to-back 2-night Bellator spectacular the following weekend in Hawaii. So that's going to be exciting to watch too.
yeah, Jack, you're going to be busy. You got Bellator, you got Rizin back to back. Jesus, how are you going to do it?
Well, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I got LFA, CFFC, other things too. It's not too crazy when you have two monitors on your screen. That definitely helps. So it helps me keep track of things. I can watch 2 things at once, 3 things at once, 4 things at once. But we do have a really busy few weeks ahead, especially when you just look at it from the JMMA angle. There's a lot to look at outside of Rizin. You mentioned the Bellator show in Hawaii. That's when we're going to see Horiguchi's return. That's going to be exciting to see how he performs on that card. So overall, a really busy few weeks ahead.
Yeah, but is there? I mean, in all fairness, what show are you looking forward to the most? Be honest. Whether it's Rizin, Trigger 3, 35, Bellator, 270, whatever it is, even LFA maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, if we're looking at this weekend, I would say that Bellator's card ranks number 1 for me, in the sense that they have this massive rematch between Pitbull and McKee, and that's just gonna be a huge fight to watch. But if we're speaking about the Rizin cards, I think that the Rizin card we have on Sunday, it's gonna be a huge deal. This is the first time that we're gonna see a lot of international fighters back, and this is something I've been saying for a while, is that this is the biggest card we've seen from them, not counting the New Year's Eve shows, since the start of the pandemic. I think that this weekend's definitely gonna be a big one for the promotion in general.
So is it fair to say, do you think we can call the pandemic era of Rizin over, or are we not there yet? What do you think?
Well, the thing is that I think that every time someone has said that a pandemic era of something is over, they've been wrong. So I think that my thing is that I just don't want to comment on that, because I feel like if I say that the pandemic issues affecting Rizin are in the past, then something's probably going to happen after and prove me wrong. So, it would probably be best for the promotion if that era has closed out. But I'm not going to, say anything for sure and curse it.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because that's exactly what happened when we had Jay Wolf on a few weeks ago, and then there was this huge surge in that went through Japan, an Omicron surge. I think it was Omicron, and then it caused just more chaos. So good on you. We don't need to jinx this at all. But yes, we are here to discuss Rizin Trigger 3rd, which will be the first of 2 shows this weekend that Rizin is on. This one going on.
If y'all already realized, we talked about Rizin 35, and that's going to be on Sunday. This is the event that's going to be on Saturday, April 16th from the Musashino Forest Sports Plaza in Choku, Tokyo, Japan. Much like Rizin 35, y'all can get it as part of the Rizin bundle, which costs $30 on Live Now. Go to Live Now Global on Twitter or live-now.com for more information. But again, as you see, Andrew has the first fight up. Let's talk about it.
Well, technically, Chris, it's the second fight because before that, listen, it would have been a Rizin show.
Let me go ahead and guess. These stupid dark matches, this ain't pro wrestling, dude. We get it.
I don't know about the dark match, but it wouldn't be a Rizin show if it didn't have a random kickboxing match. Koji Otani taking on Rikia. Listen, does anybody care? Be completely honest. Jack?
No.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where I just don't know much about either guy, so it's not like I have much of a reason to say anything about it, you know?
Gotcha. So we shouldn't. So basically, point of the matter is we shouldn't talk about it, right?
I don't even think that Verizon even released a graphic for the card for that match because I couldn't find it unless I was just being like so lackadaisical and trying to find it. But like, yeah, I couldn't find anything. That happens. Pre-show, dark match, maybe, who knows, whatever. But the real first match we got is our buddy Grant Bogdanov taking on the debuting Takeshi Izumi, grappler versus wrestler in this.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Grant Bogdanov, obviously from Des Moines, Iowa, 2-0 as a mixed martial artist. Both of those wins via finish. And he just came off a devastating submission at Rizin Trigger the second. As far as Izumi goes, he's a champion he's an amateur champion wrestler from, Tokyo, Japan, but we don't know much about him. Andrew, do you have anything to go about?
Yeah, he's mainly wrestler. He's been training for full time for about a year. But other than that, Tapology hasn't even made him a page yet. But you can see a lot of his wrestling highlights on YouTube. Those are available there. I tried to find the camp where he was from, but he's apparently of a camp called Fighters Flow, which I've never heard of that camp before. I'm usually pretty familiar with a lot of the camps in Japan, but I've never heard of Fighters Flow. And of course, he's a Japanese fighter, so he's got a YouTube as well. Jack, I'll throw this to you first. You're probably much more familiar, obviously, with Grant Bogdanov than his opponent Izumi. What do you think about this fight? You have any particular prediction?
Well, you mentioned in the pre-show the idea of a style matchup. You were talking about a different fight, but I mean that kind of applies to this one where it's two guys who are very successful in their styles colliding. We have the grappler and Grant versus the wrestler and Takeshi. This could be an interesting matchup. I do think that after you see the performance that Grant had last time, that you should expect him to sort of be the fighter being showcased in this fight. At least that's sort of what I'm assuming is going on here. It only made sense for him to come back to Rizin after the win he had last time. And I do think that he seems like someone that they want to build up as sort of one of those younger prospect guys.
Well, that's a great question. That's a great statement. But then I wonder if they want to build up Grant, why would you put a debuting guy? I always assume that when somebody is making their debut, you're not doing it just because for shits and giggles, because you want to showcase them with a win or with a great performance or, build them up down the line. So that's why I'm a little bit perplexed, because if they want I know that Sakakibara loves like amateur wrestlers, Greco-Roman wrestlers. If you look at the history of Pride and Dream, like they basically would, they would scout the Olympics and pro wrestling schools and all that to find people who were like in that specific field. So I know that he loves people, fighters or people coming from that discipline. Is that a little bit odd if you want this guy long term to put him up against a guy like Grant Bogdanov, who has, granted not that much experience in MMA, but clearly black belt in jiu-jitsu, who, we saw what happened with Ota and Tokoro, a pretty mismatch for Oda to take that fight. I mean, I can't believe that the same thing will not happen this fight.
Yeah, well, I think that to be fair, it's not fully like fair for me to say that this is a showcase for Grant, because the unknowns that we have about Izumi, he could be incredibly dominant. He could go out there and win in like 1 minute. And it's just we don't know too much about him to say how he's going to go against Grant. I think what's interesting about this matchup is, since both guys are very early in their careers, this is one of those tests where it's, okay, we know you're good at your specialty, but let's see how you do in the world of MMA. And you're going up against someone else who is still really dipping their toes in the sport. And it wouldn't surprise me if whoever wins here goes on and whoever loses goes, maybe I'll try this again, but maybe this sport isn't for me to do.
Chris, we spoke to Grant. He's always confident, very confident. Said he would get a submission win. Didn't say how. Yeah. Do you think this will be? What do you think about Jack's points? That's a pretty interesting point. The points that he brings up. Do you think that do you think this might be the one fighter that gives Bogdanov any sort of trouble?
Could you repeat the question? You're kind of like, you're kind of in and out, man.
Oh, sorry. Do you think Jack brought up some great points? Do you think though that Izumi is gonna maybe be the first fighter that gives any trouble to Bogdanov?
I doubt it, especially considering the fact that this dude is a debuting fighter. But the thing is, though, when you look at the fact that obviously Bogdanov has more experience, there's no way that if he loses this fight, he's going to want to try something else. Obviously, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu notwithstanding. But still, though, point of the matter is, I don't think that this fight should be labeled as a pushover for, Grant Bogdanov either, because, this fight ain't going to be an easy fight by any means, but I just hope it'll be a fun fight for Bogdanov in order for him to get the win via submission. As far as Izumi goes, this is going to be the, maiden test, the litmus test for him, as opposed to, if I even want to continue or if this is the right sport for me. And, as far as Izumi goes, I just hope he has fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think to get the win via submission.
Oh no, I think so too. Jack, do you want to make a prediction in this fight particularly?
I guess, yeah, I would have to go with the prediction that probably Grant would get the submission. I mean, either way this goes, I think it's going to end via stoppage.
Well, here and the other thing as well, I forgot to mention as well, and Chris, you remember this? Grant is originally a wrestler from Iowa, which is a well-known state for producing some of the best wrestlers. He didn't go to Iowa State though, I don't think. So I forgot to mention that as well. So he does have wrestling in his background. But yeah, I haven't seen any real footage of Izumi. I can't make a clear thought on how he's going to fight, but I just have Bogdanov obviously is more familiar to the game. So I have to assume that he's going to have to win this.
There's certainly some unknowns going into this one for all of us.
Oh yeah. Who knows? Maybe Graham will win with a jumping flying knee or something crazy. Who knows? But now this is a much more interesting fight.
Basically, you're saying you're gonna have a reverse analogy, and that this won't be like Paul Simtek's Daily versus MVP.
Oh God, no. That's an outlier fight. That's an incredible outlier of a fight that I hope never happens again.
Of course, understood. Now you got another fight going up on the page. Obviously, it's a fight between two Japanese competitors. Let's talk about it.
Yes, we got Takagi Soya Oops, I just lost the page. Sorry, gentlemen. Chris, you want to take over for me? I just lost my page. I can't get it back up.
I think you're saying it's Takaki Soya versus Nakatsu Kato, right?
No, Nobuyoshi Nakatsu Kaza. Say that 5 times. Now here's the interesting thing about Soya. He's had some of the shittiest luck. You know, we talk about, I think like Ian McCall might be the pinnacle of like Western MMA bad luck. But Soya might have like the worst in Japanese MMA. Wife died a few years ago. He has his Crohn's disease is continuously been an issue for him. Herniated disc, almost 3 year layoff, lost a number of kilograms. He got 2 incredible highlight knockouts in Rizin, but after that, he just seemingly, injuries, medical stuff, and all that. So this is his return fight finally, and he's taking on a guy who's finished all of his fights. And so, Jack, do you remember Soya's kind of brief tenure in Rizin?
Yeah, I remember it briefly. I mean, it's kind of a distant memory now, but I certainly remember his fights and I remember him. I think that if there's one thing that is sort of better about MMA compared to other sports is that if you have momentum going for you record-wise, and you have to take a break because of whatever reason, he obviously took a break because of a combination of horrible reasons, unfortunate reasons. You can come back and that momentum isn't necessarily fully gone. I mean, this is still a guy who's on a finish streak in his return now. So that I think that should be emphasized heading into this fight, that he still has that. He's shown he has that dangerous power in his most recent appearances.
What do you think about the fact that he's taking on a guy who has finished all of his fights, mostly by submission? And I mean, granted, the competition that he was facing wasn't top competition, but I mean, what do you think that? Whenever I hear about medical, I always I'm reminded of Lesnar versus Overeem. If you remember that fight where Lesnar came back from the colon disease that he had, I'm forgetting what it was called. But yeah, I remember that he had intense surgery on his stomach, and what does Overeem do? He gives him a body punch, and that basically sends Brock. That's his weak point. So, do you think? I mean, what would you say? And watching MMA as much as you have, when you've seen fighters come back from medical issues such as that, or really bad injuries like a herniated disc, are they usually successful in their return when they come back?
Well, I mean, I think it depends. You obviously in any break of that to that long extent, you do lose something. It's just a matter if you can get it back or not. Some people, their injuries are horrible and they never get it back, and that's basically the beginning of the end of their career. So I guess that is more than anything heading into this fight. This question is who are we going to be seeing fighting when Takaki Soya fights? Are we going to be seeing the person we saw years ago, or has this time off and has the injuries he's faced? Is that going to play a huge factor in how he performs now?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Chris, so we got one guy who's finished all of his fights, and most of them by sub. One guy, and then Soya, who's never been finished by submission. Do you think that this? Do you think this might be Soya's? His? Do you think there's a chance that Soya gets submitted? That maybe all of his medical issues, health issues, are just he's gonna have to bring that. He's gonna have to bring that to the cage along with his 2+ year layoff.
To be quite honest, I think it's sad that Takaki Soya has had the worst luck, because it's like you said, the dude's gone through a combination of layoff, the pandemic, and Crohn's disease. So, it's just sad that he's continuing this story. But, there's a reason why they call it a comeback, and I think that Soya is probably going to overcome this. But as far as Nakasukata is concerned, He is looking to prove that he is not fighting no guys that set up. No, he's looking to prove that he's not trying to fight guys who set up mechanical bulls and noodle shops or something. If you don't know the reference, please don't search it up. But still, though, I think Sawyer's going to, try his best to avoid Nakasukata's submission game, and he's probably going to get this via knockout, if not via decision, because he needs something to shake off, in this case, the cage rust.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that has to be mentioned as well, I'm going to call him NOV because that's what he goes by, Nakatsuka, NOV, is that he fights mainly at strawweight. He is not a flyweight. Soya is a flyweight. That's his weight class. So what do you think about that, Jack? We got NOV who's going up in weight for this fight.
Yeah, I actually, thinking about this matchup, I thought that this is a matchup that heavily favors Soya. I mean, I looked at a combination of things. I saw Nakatsukasa is 35 years old. He's an explosive fighter, but he has taken losses before, and he's taken losses to guys who on the regional scene don't have that impressive of a record. So there's some questions here that can be raised, and you also brought up another one, that he's going up in a weight class. So is that going to help him? I mean, no, probably not. So I think, obviously when someone comes back, you don't know what skill level they're going to be at, being gone for about 3 years, Soya was. But when I think about this matchup, I do think it's one that is a good return bout for him.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny that the two guys.
You know what? Come to think of it, before we even continue on about this, you have to think about it for a second. Nakasukata is coming up from strawweight, men's strawweight at that, which is, the pack mule, the rare unicorn, one of the rare unicorns in fighting. Do you think that'll probably give him an advantage of, by default being one of the top men's actual strawweight fighters in the world?
Hey, Jack, what do you think about that?
Will Nakatsukasa get a benefit from going up?
Well, being that he is one of the higher ranked strawweight fighters in Japan, he's not some pushover who's under 500 or has anything like that. He is one of the one of the more acclaimed strawweight fighters in Japan.
I mean, I don't think he's a push. I don't think he's a pushover. I just
one
think
of the more skilled.
I don't think he's a pushover. I just think that this is not a matchup that favors him on paper.
Well, it's funny because that Soya's only 2 fights in Rizin were against strawweights going up. So I find that very funny. And again,
he's a bit of a weight bully.
Yeah, and the streak continues. I do agree. I think it's not like when you see someone go from light heavyweight to heavyweight, you see a lot of increase in power. Like when the weight classes as they go up, but like 112 to 125 is really like legitimately like weight bullying. Like no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Listen, this should be all Soya. But if he loses this, I think it's definitely fair to say that a lot of it might, I don't want to say that his health would be an excuse, but it's definitely something to point to, just to lay off losing all the. I don't know if anybody saw the Rizin Confessionals video that just came out this week, but yeah, they chronicled all of his issues and losing the weight he had while sick and all that. So, because he also said that this Crohn's disease it comes at random times. So I'm assuming it didn't come up at this time during his camp, but future fight, if that comes up, listen, he's gonna, you'll know, because if he's fighting horribly or misses weight or comes underweight, then you could maybe definitely surmise, listen, this guy still has to still deal with that. Also, it has to be mentioned as well, Rizin is currently building a flyweight division. I definitely feel like they want Soya to be a part of it. Whenever they decide to Grand Prix or whatever. And I definitely think that they have Soya in mind to be a strong part of that division. I unfortunately skipped two of the fights, and I'm going to add them right now. So my bad on that.
Yes, so, dude. When it comes down to those fights, I'm pretty sure that they're just as interesting as watching paint dry.
Well, no, I have to disagree, especially with this one. Tetsuya Saika take on Kimihiro Eto. Chris, you might know Eto is from Wajutsu Ketsukai Hearts, where our buddy Nakata-san trains.
Oh, yes, of course, of course. I mean, I think we all remember that fight camp by now. I mean, we've interviewed Mr. Nakata, the rich, our boy, too many times already. So I'm pretty sure we're familiar with Wajutsu Ketsukai Hearts. But as far as Tatsuya Yambo, obviously, I mean, what do we know about him?
Well, he's a Pancrase title contender. He's finished all of his fights, all of his wins by knockouts. And his most recent fight was he came close to winning the Pancrase lightweight title against Takasuke Kume. But he got armbarred in that. And it was actually, I'm surprised in that armbar.
So basically, what you're saying is he's a former lightweight king Pancrase title challenge.
Yeah. Also, just want to read in the chat, our buddy Daniel Dizabecki says flyweight GP greater than featherweight GP. I don't know about I don't know. That's a tough one. Jack, what do you think about that? Could a flyweight Grand Prix be better than the potential featherweight Grand Prix that Rizin might do this year?
I don't know. I think the featherweight Grand Prix has a really good field for right now in Rizin. But I think that they're both pretty solid Grand Prix. I think that the thing is for the featherweight, I feel like you could, if you wanted to, well, I guess past this weekend, make the Grand Prix right now for featherweight.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can do that for flyweight, but I do think that, within no time you can put a flyweight Grand Prix together.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So going back to this fight, Eto, mainly well known for fighting in One. He had a very extensive career in One.
Don't started on that damned One championship.
So Jack, I'm gonna throw it to you. Did you happen to ever see Eto fight in One?
Yeah, I saw his ones on their flagship programming. I didn't see any of his he was on some smaller one shows that aren't like their main ones, but I saw his bigger fights.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so it's gonna be pure striker versus pure grappler in this fight, as you can see, with the 7 knockouts versus the 7 submission wins that Eto has. So Jack, I want to post it to you. What do you think about this fight? And do you have a particular? What do you think will be the dominant martial art in this match? Striking or grappling?
Well, I think that this type of matchup is the type of matchups that you want to see on these trigger cards. We have someone in Tatsuya who has proven himself on the regional scene and record-wise is in a really good spot to get that trigger call. And we also have someone like Eto who, he's a much more experienced guy, but he's just fresh out of One. And I don't know if you can necessarily just throw him onto a numbered Rizin card. So I really do think this matchup is one of the more fitting ones you can make for a card like this. I do think the experience edge, having gone to Eto, is going to give him the what he needs to win this fight. But I mean, we'll see. Crazier things have happened.
So what if I told you that Saika has finished all of his fights by knockout in the first round, and some have come, and a lot of 3 of them have come under 1 minute. What does that tell you?
Well, I would ask you, who is he facing in these matchups? Is he facing some people with negative records? Is he facing some people who are, these results are obviously impressive, and it means that you could get a finish, but you have to keep in mind who is he facing in these results.
Mm-hmm. Well, probably his highest competition so far, his 2 pieces of highest competition were Genpai Hayashi, Pancrase 318, who was 10-8 and 1 at the time, and Tom Santos from Brazil, who was 11-9 at the time, and Tom Santos actually fought in Rizin against Darian Cruikshank many eons ago. And the rest of his opponents, 11-18, 0-1, 2-2, 1-7, 2-6. What is that? Does that I don't know, does that change your opinion? Does that make you feel like, oh well, this guy hasn't really fought anybody that's high level at this point?
Well, if you get those finishes, it shows that you have that power, So it's just we're gonna have to see. I mean, this is a big test for him, in my opinion. So we're really gonna get to see in this fight how he does against a more experienced name and how he does against a different style matchup. It's worth noting he's facing a grappler. He got submitted in his last fight. What does that tell us about how this fight could possibly play out?
Daniel Duzebeki actually brought up a fight. I remember this. Eto got out wrestled by Aoki. Now, do you remember that fight? Aoki was basically just playing with Eto the entire time. He could have submitted him like 1,000 times, but he deliberately was like being like a troll in that match.
So, come to think of it, Eto was facing off against the Shinya Aoki, right?
Yes, and listen. I guess it's kind of a compliment to say you didn't get submitted by Aoki, but I think that was more Aoki being not submitting him deliberately. In that case, I suggest everybody go watch that fight because it is. I think there's like very few fights that are like troll jobs that are going on during the fight, but that fight is just like 3 rounds of Aoki just wrestle trolling Eto to a decision win. It's really
and the fact that it was probably a master class from Shinya Aoki on how to be an asshole while fighting.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This is when he was doing it. This is when and I think this is his whole. That was when he was doing his whole like I hate working in one thing and all that. He was like trying to like get into Rizin and all that. It was like that whole.
And he still is fighting like he hates one and still wants to be in Rizin.
That's true. Well, that's true for whatever reason. I guess it's Eto probably his most notable win. Amir Khan, not the boxer, of course.
That would be a very notable win.
Yes, that would be. But no, it was Amir Khan in 1. So Chris, I'll pose it to you. What do you think? Do we have striking or grappling deciding to win this fight?
Come to think of it, considering the fact that you got a guy who's a former lightweight King of Pancrase title challenger versus a guy who pretty much got trolled by one of the greatest but most controversial fighters in all of Japanese MMA history that's not a heavyweight. It's too hard to call. But I'm going to pick Yambo in this one. I'm going to pick Yambo because I think he got the tools to win this particular fight and not get troll jobbed. I think that he's going to probably win this fight, if not by decision, then definitely by finishing in the last 2 rounds, not the first.
Interesting. I'm gonna be maybe the lone guy here who picks grappling.
I picked grappling too.
Yeah, I was about to say. Yeah, I thought you did. Okay, never mind. I guess it's 2-1 for grappling. That thinks that this fight will go, which means that Saika will turn into a grappler in this fight and somehow submit Eto. This is what's going to happen probably. By Jack and I picking grappling, the grappler to grapple his way to a win in this. No, just kidding. No, I think Jack, you brought up a great point that while Saika really has had not the best competition in his career, probably Eto has definitely faced higher level, and has come out the winner. Yeah, I'm gonna have to pick Eto on this. This next fight though, I think is gonna be awesome. Shuto Watanabe on Takuma Sudo, 2 submission masters.
You know what? That's your fight right there. Why don't you talk more about it since you're a big fan of Shuto Watanabe?
Well, Jack, I'm gonna throw it to you. We got fighter who's been Sudo, who's been fighting for about a year, submitted everybody by submission by some variation of the leg lock. And we got Shuto on the other side, who's his main weapon is choking people out, rear naked chokes. Well, how do you think this match will go?
Well, geez, I mean, I don't know how this match will go. If I had to jump right into prediction, I would say maybe we're going to see a win from Watanabe here. But the thing is that this is just really good matchmaking, in my opinion. We have Watanabe, who's super experienced, and he's been there before, versus Sudo, who is perfect through his career so far. And this is a really huge step up, not just in competition, but in level of fight. Like when you think about being on a bigger stage, having much more eyes on you, Sudo fought in smaller shows on the regional scene, smaller shows compared to other shows on the regional scene. So this is a huge step up for him in competition and in spectacle. So I'm really interested to see how he does. It will be a big statement to beat Watanabe, even though Watanabe is someone who hasn't put up amazing results in Rizin. I think that for someone who's only 5-0 to beat him, that would be a statement win. So if Sudo can pull off something like that, this would be a huge fight for him. And we would probably see him on like a numbered show next.
What's also fascinating is that these two are different. They fight grappling in different ways. Sudo is all about the leg locks and heel hooks, all that stuff, while Shuto is more has more of that old school approach to grappling. Forcing your opponent down, taking their back, choking them out. I'm not so sure what Shuto's experience or background is in leg locks, but I have to believe I don't think I've ever seen him use it as far as I can remember. What do you think about that though? What do you think that what do you think about just their different approaches to grappling, particularly how they win their matches?
Well, I think that means we could be in for a real grappling treat, or of course, it being MMA and MMA things happening, this could be a great striking matchup.
Oh,
you never
I was
know.
about to ask.
No, Jack. No. Why you gotta say it like that? Because
Hey, listen, I'm just because if we focus on too much of the grappling and then all of a sudden it's a striking match, it makes us look like idiots. So we have to point out it's completely entirely possible.
Chris, in fairness, he's not wrong. Jack is not. Listen, it's kind of like when two strikers.
I'm never wrong, first of all.
Well, that's true.
Sorry, go ahead.
You are an award-winning journalist after all, so of course not. But like when two people who are so good at what they do face off, they almost are hesitant to do what they do because I think they don't want to lose in what they're so good at. And it's like when bring it up again, MVP and Paul Daly, both knockout strikers. What does MVP do? Grapples. Lays on Paul Daly for a win. Nagano, Derek Lewis, both one-punch knockout strikers, stare at each other for 5 rounds, I think it was.
Well, my favorite thing to bring up is that when heavyweight fights are hyped up, people always say, don't blink, this could last, only moments. But a lot of the times, the reasons why those fights actually end up lasting long because both these guys know they have this knockout power and they don't really want to test it too much.
Yeah.
So you can flip that and talk about grappling, and that when two grapplers know that they're grappling threats, they're going to go, well, no, I'm just going to try to strike it with this guy because I know my striking abilities, and I might be a better striker than him. So it's entirely possible. But with going back to your thing about the different grappling styles, I mean, it's entirely possible that we could see two different grappling styles sort of collide with each other in the cage. I almost said ring, not ring, in the cage this weekend at Triggers. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Here's the other thing as well. So Pseudo's fought in promotions where they don't allow soccer kicks or whatever to a grounded opponent. He tries to grab a leg. You can just smash Pseudo if he wanted to. Could just smash Pseudo with his feet, or kick him while he's trying to do an Imanari or whatever. So what about that? Would you say that the rules to a ground opponent would favor more has a potential less favorable outcome to somebody who depends on heel hooks, leg locks, knee bars?
Yeah, I mean, I know that the as Jay Wolf would call it, the superior rule set is a way that is something that you have to adapt your style to. But personally, I don't know. Like, I don't feel like it's something where you have to worry too much about that. I mean, I could be wrong, and this match could end in a way that just makes me look like an idiot. But I don't consider it to be too big of a factor. But it is, with that being said, certainly a factor. So.
Mhm. I also want to know, Jack, curious, as you watch almost or cover almost all types of MMA, what do you define as a prospect? And if I'm curious to know, under your definition of prospect, would you consider pseudo a prospect?
I would absolutely consider pseudo a prospect. Yes, I think that and I don't think too much about prospects. It's sort of like a feeling thing where there's no textbook definition. You just sort of you see someone and you know. But the thing with pseudo is that we've yet to see his ceiling as a fighter. I would say that with most people in their careers, at some point you see where their ceiling is and they stay around there for the rest of their career. That's why we have gatekeepers. That's why we have a lot of people who don't really reach certain heights that you might expect them to. Pseudo 5-0, he's getting his first Rizin shot. We don't know what his ceiling is. And I feel like for a prospect, it's following someone until you run up against that wall and realize, okay, this is as far as he's going to go for now. And then you later on figure out, okay, can they improve more, or is that kind of like where they're sticking?
Chris, I'm curious to know, how do you think, what do you think will be the pace of this match? Will it be constant grappling exchanges? Will it be kind of like?
I hope it won't be constant grappling. If y'all think that it's gonna be constant grappling, y'all must need to get y'all MMA education. What the fuck am I trying to say? Y'all need to get y'all MMA education again. If y'all think this is gonna be constant grappling, like it's Daly versus Page again.
Don't forget, those are two guys who are not grapplers who are grappling, but these are two grapplers who could potentially be grappling. I mean, do you think that it could be a much more exciting exchange? I'm trying to think of like what would be like the recent match. I forgot, it was Chase Hooper versus Jack. You might remember. Remember the guy that Chase Hooper and was facing off against, and he just kept on like Chase Hooper was like taking his back, but then the fighter was getting like off his back or whatever. Do you remember that fight?
Peter Barrett? I'm not up on my Chase Hooper lore.
Okay.
Young man, you got a lot to learn. But still though, point of the matter is, I don't think that this fight is gonna be labeled as a grapple fest. I think this is gonna be a pretty strategic fight where they just basically beating the shit out of each other for 3 rounds and exciting fans in that cage. But as far as the winner is concerned, I think Shudo is going to win this one because he just has more of that intensity. Plus, he's a second-generation fighter.
I was thinking of Steven Peterson. That's who I was thinking of.
Oh, no, I think I remember Steven Ocho Peterson from Legacy FC. It's just too bad he's floundering in that 3-letter promotion that I don't want to say on here.
Mm-hmm. So actually, here's the other thing as well, Chris, I was going to ask. So, this is obviously going to be Pseudo's biggest fight up until, I'm sure, do you think that potentially that Shuto will just be used to the atmosphere and the bigger crowd? And I don't know, listen, some people choke under the bigger crowds.
Yeah, some people choke under pressure. I mean, regular sports can do that to you. But, this is the fight game. You either got to know when to hold them it's like that Kenny Rogers song, The Gambler. You got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. But still, though, I don't think Watanabe is going to choke under pressure for this fight. I just don't think so because he basically has had that born into him from his father Yuichi not to choke under pressure.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna have to agree because I think Shuto, just also because he has just more MMA experience. Also, I'm gonna assume that he will know how to apply all the MMA in this fight, and I think he can. I don't know if he can submit Shuto, but I think he can outwork Shuto. with all the tools that come into MMA. Jack, what do you think? Is it too hard to pick for you, or do you have a definitive pick?
I'm gonna stick with my prediction. I mean, I like the idea of seeing a prospect grow and grow and grow, but I do think this is a really tough test. It wouldn't surprise me if Watanabe hands Sudo his first loss here. And that's not to say this is the end of Sudo, but this is a really tough test for him, and I see Watanabe getting the win.
Hmm. The other thing about the trigger shows, I'm curious to ask you, Jack. I remember when they were first announced? They were supposed to be like kind of like people who were older veterans taking on people that were either up and coming, or people trying to get a win back, those veterans. Have the trigger shows been doing that? Because I feel like trigger shows are starting to become kind of like a B show for Rizin, kind of not this showcasing this still name talent, but on a smaller stage ish. Do you think? What do you think?
Well,
about
I mean, that in my opinion, that's exactly what they are. I think that any sort of fancy way to describe it is just sort of like a marketing way to describe it. But like, I've from the very start considered these like the UFC Fight Night to Rizin. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, these Fight Night shows in UFC keep their ecosystem of fighters going. But I think that if you're looking for any sort of theme that goes throughout these trigger shows, you're not going to find it, because some people are debuting, some people it's their 40th fight, some people it's their 6th fight and they're 5-0 and they're a prospect. There's no real consistent theme, but it's just one of those things where it's a collection of fights which you wouldn't necessarily throw together and call it a numbered card.
Hmm. And so we're going to move on to a fight that goes from prospects to veterans. And we got Masanori Kanehara taking on Kazumasa Majima. And this one I'm really, really looking forward to.
I'm pretty sure you are, considering the fact that it's the guy who beat Kid Yamamoto on New Year's Eve back in 2009 versus the guy who's the former Rebel FC featherweight champion.
No, whatever happened with Rebel FC? Did they just disappear, Chris?
And they're probably stuck in, Singaporean purgatory.
So Jack, obviously you're familiar with Kanehara, and we've seen, his so far his one win return back to featherweight in Rizin being a great win. But Majima, on the other hand, is 0-2 in Rizin and got finished kind of pretty badly in those two fights. What do you think about this fight, kind of pitting these two veterans at 145?
Yeah, well, I think that this is a better matchup for Majima after facing Saito and after facing Kleber Koike. Those are two matchups that are pretty brutal. I mean, think about it. Those are like two of the top names in the promotion. So, back-to-back losses in brutal fashion. Doesn't necessarily say too much about him as a fighter. It just says that he's not one of the most elite fighters, which isn't insulting to say per se. So, this is probably a more realistic matchup for him to get. Kanehara, where he's coming off that victory, so I guess the momentum's in his favor. But I think that if there's one thing I can actually give credit to Rizin for on this card, is that up and down it, apart from like one fight that we're going to get to, I think the matchmaking has been pretty amazing on this show. We see a lot of matchups where I think it's pretty close to call on paper, and I think it's a lot of like even type matchups, and I think this is certainly one of those.
What about pitting someone who is 1-0 against somebody who's 0-2? Now, granted, Rizin doesn't have rankings. At least they promoting rankings. Maybe they have something internally or something. But do you think it makes sense to have a fighter who's 0-2 versus a fighter who is 1-0?
Well, it's worth noting he's 1-1 because he had a loss to Victor Henry.
I'm counting at featherweight. I'm at the featherweight. If it was bantamweight, yeah, different. But I'm considering 1-0 at featherweight.
Yeah, well, I think that when you're booking shows outside of a promotion like UFC, where you have a lot of veterans and people who really get their wins, and you judge their wins and losses off of what they've done in the UFC. I think that when you're doing something like for a different promotion, you have to just look at their overall records and their overall work outside the promotion. When you isolate things to just within what they've done inside the promotion, you usually have just such a small data set that it's hard to really judge what you're kind of matchmaking off of. I think that when you look at the overall record of both of these guys, it's a good matchup to make.
Chris, so obviously, I know you're a longtime fan of Kanehara. I know you're a fan of Majima. How do you think this fight will go?
I think when it comes down to this particular fight, you have to look at it from Kanehara's perspective because he's more the veteran in this one. Like, let's just say, I think around Rizin 22 when he got whooped by Henry, right?
Yep. That's correct.
Yeah, back around Rizin. Yeah, back around 2 years ago, dude wanted to retire because of the fact that, MMA life was just getting too much for him. Obviously, he retired during the pandemic and looked sharp as a tack. But you would also have to think, is this the last we're going to potentially see Masanori Kanehara? This guy who beat Kid Yamamoto, this guy who was the guy who did fight in the UFC at a point or two, even before or after the Reebocalypse. But still, I think that when it comes down to this particular fight, this might be Kanehara's toughest test since coming back. And even though Majima, isn't really doing too well in Rizin, we need not forget that this dude was once an undefeated champion for a certain promotion out in Hong Kong and Singapore.
Yeah. Sorry.
But still, the point of the matter is, I think that Kanehara's going to win this fight.
Do you see him finishing Majima?
Possibly. But I don't think that it's going to land in the judge's hands. That's what I think.
So Jack, what do you think? How do you think this fight will go? Do you have a prediction? Do you think we'll see Majima go 0-3, and then or Kanehara get his first loss at Rizin featherweights? Also, keep in mind, we're talking about fighters going up in weights, the flyweight, strawweight to flyweight. You got Kanehara who's gone up at from bantamweight to featherweight. And actually, and I have to thank Daniel Duzubeki for this. He said that Kanehara had more success at featherweight when he was doing featherweight back in Sengoku, and beat people like he actually beat Korean Zombie way back when. And what do you think Kanehara's 145 success will continue?
Well, I think, like I've said before, these are good matchups. I think that I'm a little torn on this one. I guess I'm going to go with Kanehara. On paper, if this happens where Majima gets finished, I think that's going to be sort of a wake-up call on his record for 3 consecutive finishes. But I think I'm going to side with Kanehara for this one, and I think it'll go to decision.
Also, Majima hasn't fought since that clever loss. That was about a year ago. I don't know what the reason for was the reason for that layoff. I don't know if it was injury or just couldn't get a fight booked or whatever it was. I know that he's most famous for having a job as a welder. In not what city he's from, but he actually is you would think that somebody like Majima would come in would be not 0-2 but 2-0, but it's real funny how that how that didn't go that way. It's I have to pick Kanehara as well. I think that Kanehara is just much more experienced. I think also the fact that he's not coming off from a layoff. Fighters who come off from layoffs usually aren't successful for the most part. Would you agree with that, Jack?
I think it depends on the context. I think that some fighters coming off a layoff have to be successful. 1 year isn't too brutal. I mean, when you say 2 year, 3 year, that's when it starts to get a little extreme. But
it's also who they face, right? Like, but this is Majima is going up against Kanehara, a very strong fighter. He's not facing a guy who's 0-2 or 2-0 or making his debut. So this is a tough test for him. But I do think Kanehara is going to get the win in this. I think that he's poised to be a strong force at featherweight, not featherweight. Yeah, featherweight, excuse me. Daniel says Kanehara is more all-rounded than Majima, but past his prime. Majima was unlucky in his 2 fights because he started very well both bouts but got finished. That's true. He was winning the Saito fight and then missed that takedown and got kicked in the face with that sock kick. Still one of the most brutal finishes ever in Rizin. And I know for a fact Jay Wolf's most favorite finish, I think, in Rizin history.
He loves his soccer kicks.
Oh yes, he loves his superior rule set finishes. Now, gentlemen, it's not every show has a I'm sorry. Takero Man 91 has a question. Do any of you guys have any martial art training experience? Jack, I'll throw that question to you first.
No.
No karate, no Jeet Kune Do, no Power Rangers karate even or anything?
Well, no, I played some hockey for a little, so maybe that means that I can like get into a heavyweight fight where they promote me as just like this he played a sport before, but no.
I gotcha. Chris, do you have any?
Well, I spent like around a month or 2 at a friend's karate class, but that was the only little bit of, type of training that I got other than, running up and down running up and down gym steps, trying to build my cardio and actually wrestling in a match, back in 2015. But that was my only wrestling match that I'll ever be willing to take. But you, Andrew, you are the jiu-jitsu nut of the 3 of us. What about your fight experience there, pal? Will you ever take a professional fight?
Well, yes, I'm a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. If they pay me to take a fight, why not? What do
really,
free?
Dude? If they pay you, dude, you're not getting any old. You're not getting any younger. You gotta jump into this shit quick. That acting career is gonna dry up.
Listen. I've always subscribed to saying "fuck you, pay me."
Of course, you're in New York.
Or if you're a prostitute, pay me, fuck you. If you're into the oldest profession in the history of the world.
Oh my god, of course. But yeah, Takero.
Sorry, Chris, you're breaking up.
Has actual martial experience. Basically, what I'm saying is, one of us here has actual martial arts experience, and he's the guy with the red hair.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And we're going to talk. Actually, that's a great topic that Takero Man 91 brought up, because we're going to talk about experience and taking a fight. We're going to talk about somebody who'll be making their long-awaited, but their notable debut and making a triumphant return to Rizin. Hideki Shrek Sakine making his way back from the swamps, taking on the debuting Taka Kenshin, who is the twin brother, by the way. I think they're identical. Tsuyoshi Sudario. Both sumo, both exiled from sumo in very controversial fashion. In Taka Kenshin's case, it was smoking weed that he got caught with. So apparently trouble runs in that family for whatever reason. They're a bunch of rebels. But Taka Kenshin's also training out of Team Alliance, which is Tsuyoshi Kosaka's team in Japan. Jack, I don't know just thoughts. What do you think about this?
Well, I think for one, you owe Taka Kenshin an apology for saying his debut isn't long awaited. I think there's probably some sumo heads out there that are excited for this to happen.
Oh
I'll have to ask Fight Club Pizza that because he's a sumo guy. But my understanding is that he wasn't as I don't think he was as high ranking as his brother, unless not assume. That's my impression, or at least that's what I thought. But I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just playing with you, but I mean, this is one of those fights where it's heavyweight, it's someone fighting for the first time. This could be a mess, or it could actually be a surprising thing. I wrote in one of my articles that this is one of those question marks. We don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, look at you got the question mark right there.
He has a question mark on his profile. Apparently, he doesn't have a fight type yet. So, it's one of those things where you don't really know what you're going to expect from this. And as much as MMA as a sport gets a lot of interest from people for having fights where you can sort of think about how people are going to fight and how it's going to play out, this is one of those ones where your guess is as good as mine. We could have anybody in the series now tell what's going to happen.
Well, come to think of it, Jack, it's like Larry Merchant from HBO always says, this is the theater of the unexpected. And just when you expect something, you find something that's of the least expected. And I think that's what we're going to get out of Satoshi Kamiyama, a.k.a. Satoshi Sudario, a.k.a. Taka Kenshin. Because when it comes down to this fight, we really don't know what to expect other than we hope that he doesn't get mauled into oblivion by the former 1FC heavyweight title challenger and All Japan Pro Wrestler Hideki Shrek Sakine.
Don't forget Pro Wrestling Noah as well. Don't
of course. Noah. Of course. And who can also forget he's a former cop, current cop as well.
Also ADCC absolute division competitor and heavyweight as well.
That too. Hopefully you'll never bump into him.
Would I be in the? Oh yeah, I wouldn't want to do that. But Jack, so here's a question. So we have the other heavyweight fight on the day after, Kosaka versus Ueda. Again, Ueda also making his debut. Would it have been kind of fun to see Ueda versus Taka Kenshin, considering one's karate, one's sumo? Kind of like it would be both making their debuts. It'd be kind of like an old school like UFC fight, kind of like how they used to do karate guy versus whatever guy, yada yada yada. Wouldn't that have been a little bit I don't know. I just feel that'd be a lot more interesting.
Well, I guess it's one of those things where the issue with having two guys debut against each other is one of them has to lose, or one of them, would likely lose unless you get like a draw or something. So maybe it's one of those things where they're trying to build two guys they can put up against each other instead of rushing into matching them with each other. I think here we're running the risk of a veteran having a pretty easy win. Like I said before, I can't really rate Taka Kenshin as a fighter. Well, actually, no, I can't rate Taka Kenshin as a fighter because I don't know what to say about him. If you can move over a little, it says no data right there. So what is there to really say about this other than if Shrek gets a pretty easy win here, we'll sort of look at this in retrospect and go, what happened there?
Also, I think Rizin did my boy Shrek dirty. He won his last fight in Rizin. He shouldn't be on the trigger card. He should be on 35. That's my opinion.
And I think he sort of had a nice little spotlight on New Year's Eve, and that he had this real emotional post-fight interview. I think that I was sort of surprised by how much attention he got on that show, because first of all, to get one of the to get a moment on New Year's Eve that people take away from the show is a big deal, because not only do a trillion things happen on New Year's Eve cards, a lot of big things happen. So I think that for him to be one of those memories on New Year's Eve, I thought maybe they should have capitalized on that and just thrown this matchup on the numbered show. This seems like a real sort of Rizin-esque fight where there's a weird unknown going into it. I thought this could have definitely went on the numbered show instead.
I also, here's my other theory why they didn't do Kosaka versus Taka Kenshin. If you remember during the Openweight Grand Prix, Kosaka fought a former sumo guy in Baruto and lost because Baruto basically just laid on him 3 rounds. So I think that's the reason why they didn't book Taka Kenshin and Kosaka, maybe because they were worried that the same thing could potentially happen. But I have to say, wouldn't have been also been cooler because if Kosaka's retiring, put up against Shrek, two veterans, more similar in age, and just kind of, two veterans of the game, and one who's retiring, and one, I don't know, who fights like it's his last match in Shrek. I don't know. Will that fight have been also interesting, Jack?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a combination of things they could have done here. This is just the one they decide to do, I guess. But yeah, I if there's anything I could change about it right now, I would say, Shrek should have probably went on the numbered card, or just this fight overall should have went on the numbered card. As for this matchup, none of us can really say, as it stands right now, how this matchup will go, how good or how bad it is, because there's so little to.
Well, it's not going to be bad. It will not be bad. It might be fun.
It could be bad. I mean, what if I mean, don't get too confident. I mean, it's a heavyweight fight.
It's gonna be enjoyable in its unique way. I think it's not gonna be a boring heavyweight fight. I definitely don't think that.
Yeah, well, a boring heavyweight fight has never happened. So
not at Rizin. Oh, actually, no. I take that back. The Shibisai full period fight was maybe the worst, but Trek never is boring in his fights. And like you said, like the New Year's Eve show, even though he's losing, he's still throwing wildly and German suplexing Shibisai. Trek never puts on a boring fight at all. So I can't expect that from him.
Yep, saying all that. But to be honest, all I see this fight being, and I ain't got no definitive pick. I mean, we're all just gonna pick Shrek Tsukine to win this fight anyways because of the obvious. But all I see this fight becoming is what Big E, Itowe E1 of the WWE once said, that this fight is going to be that equivalent of big meaty men slapping meat.
Daniel has a great question. I'm going to ask this to you, Jack, first. Don't you have an impression that Rizin is rebuilding slowly their heavyweight division? Shibisai, the Kamiyama brothers, Taka Kenshin and Sudario, Shrek, Biggest, who's Biggest fighting on 35. Maybe Rocky Martinez coming back, and then TK's opponent, Ueda. Do you see Rizin trying, maybe doing, now that presumably that they could also bring in foreigners, being that Japan was a desert for I'm not gonna say heavyweight fighters, but just generally well accomplished heavyweight fighters. Do you think that Rizin now sees the opportunity to build it up?
You know what? Come to think of it, Jack, before you answer that question, I just realized that the UFC cut Chase Sherman recently, not like a few days ago. Wouldn't we be best accustomed to seeing him in Rizin?
Would we be accustomed to seeing? I guess, yeah. I mean,
I think being like, would he be a good fit for Rizin? Is that what you're trying to ask? Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to ask.
Yeah, I would say so.
Would Chase Sherman be a good fit for Rizin?
Yeah, I would say so.
So what do you think about Rizin potential, looking like they're building up a heavyweight division?
Well, I think you sort of, in explaining it, answered your own question in that why they haven't done much heavyweight stuff the past few years. You think about it, they had a fair amount of heavyweight fights before the pandemic. There would be, one or two on a card. But then when the pandemic happened, you couldn't bring people into the country. Like you said, the heavyweight division in Japan's desert, there's not many heavyweight fighters. So that doesn't leave you with many options. You think about who Sudario was facing. He was facing pro wrestlers, and I don't think that's just because they were trying to give him squash matches. I think it's just because they were trying to give him matches, So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they go much more into making heavyweight fights now that people are coming into the country, but because it's one of those things where you need that to keep the division going. That the country isn't sustainable for just having heavyweights face heavyweights within the country. You have to bring people in. So yeah, like I said, I do think that they are. I don't know how heavy they're going to go into building the division, but they're certainly doing that. Yes.
And so actually, you brought up a great point. Let's look at the way that Sudario first started to rise and facing basically pro wrestlers, and
pro wrestlers and Minoa Man.
Well, technically the pro wrestler. I'm not technically wrong about that. Well, but 2 pro wrestlers and an undersized heavyweight fighter, I'll say.
Right.
But now his twin brother is his first fight is against a guy who's, not a pro. Well, I mean, he is a pro wrestler technically, but is much more accomplished MMA fighter. I mean, what do you think? Do you think it's kind of like throwing somebody to the wolves and seeing if they survive?
In a way, it has to be, because if you think about it, you don't put somebody who just learned how to ride a bike on the back of a Kawasaki or something like that.
Jack, what do you think about that? That he's kind of being thrown to the wolves.
Do I think this is throwing someone to the wolves?
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Daniel says this is a bit different philosophy because they are trying to build some fighters. In Pride, Dario would be thrown to Mark Hunt, Wanderley, or Fedor on New Year's Eve. That's very true. That's very true. So are we all? I think I have to say that as of this moment, Takaka Kenshin is going to kind of go into the lion's den and hope not to get treated like a sheep. But I think he's gonna I think he's gonna go into the pantheon of sumos turned MMA fighters who are unsuccessful, at least in their debut. Maybe we'll see. We could be entirely wrong, but like just on the surface, being thrown with somebody like Shrek, unless Takaka Kenshin lays on him for 3 rounds, I don't know how he's gonna win this fight. I mean,
so basically, what you're saying is he's not gonna get treated like Centauriu or Tali Tuli.
If he's smart, that's how he wins. Just lays on Shrek. Doesn't let Shrek get up, and all that. Does the whatever they call the bully sumo thing to him. That's the only way I can see him even getting.
Basically, what you're saying is he should throw as many Mongolian thrusts as he can.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, throw as many Mongolian thrusts in this fight, and try not to tire out as well. That's the thing, is that the pace is going to be, if he hasn't been doing his cardio, it's gonna be a long 15 minutes for this fight.
Of course it will, but then again, at least we're gonna be getting, if it's like big meaty men slapping meat, we're definitely gonna get our money's worth no matter how the fight finishes. Now we go from big boys to the bantamweights. And I think you, Andrew, got a little graphic up talking about that next fight. It's Yuta Kentaro Hokamura versus Kazuma Kuramoto. Talk about it.
Sure. Before I go into that, we got a question from the Carol Man 91. Maybe Daniel, you probably see the question. Maybe you would know better. So what he asked, what are the top 5 MMA gyms? That's a tough one. Top 5 MMA, I'll definitely say Parashra Matsudo. I guess like not in any correct order, but Parashra Matsudo and Chiba, Triforce, and then I don't know, but like the people that Mikuru has trained have not been successful. So I guess it's a well-known gym, but not producing people in that sense. I would definitely say, Chris, you definitely would agree with me. Kenji Osawa's gym, Wajutsu Ketsukai Hearts, is definitely one of the top ones, I would say.
Indeed.
That's 3. I'm trying to think of 2 more.
I think you're forgetting.
Sorry, go ahead.
One, Abe Ani Combat.
Oh yes, okay, yeah, ADCC as well.
ACC, not ADCC.
I'm thinking of Abu Dhabi.
Oh my God, Andrew. And you know what? One more gym we can also count: Team Smoker.
I don't know if that's a top gym. I don't think it's a top. Maybe in Osaka it's a top gym. But I don't know about top gym overall.
I mean, it's either that or Triforce. Osaka.
I take it back. No, not Team Smoker. I would definitely say Brave, Miyata's gym. Definitely Brave.
But you say Brave. What about Cave? Taro Ishiwatari's gym.
I definitely think that Cave will definitely be one of the. I don't. I think top 10. I mean, Saito was champion, but I feel like Brave has produced a lot more top fighters in Japan. Cave definitely can maybe crack the top 5. You know, if Saito beats Juntaro, definitely think so. Crazy B, not Crazy B anymore, unfortunately. I think Crazy B is.
I mean, it's like you said, Crazy B is a shrine to Kid Yamamoto now, pretty much.
Daniel Dizabeki actually brought up K Clan. K Clan, because I swear to God, that I think Deep basically, if you're in K Clan, you basically have an open door to Deep. So just by process of elimination, like there's like the amount of fighters that fight in Deep that are from K Clan is like ginormous.
Just as long as you can deal with Kazunori Yokota's mindset, so to speak.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. But yeah, well, let's get back to this fight. Co-main Kintaro. Speaking of Osaka, but not Team Smoker, Kintaro taking on Kazuma Kuramoto. Quite a not a short layoff, but I guess a short turnaround for Kuramoto after his destruction of Kenji Kato at the last Trigger show. Jack, we got Kuramoto is his wrestling credentials are he's got so many accolades as a Greco-Roman wrestler, and he's a tough guy. Kintaro loves to just beat the shit out of his opponents. How do you think this fight will go?
Yeah, well, I'm happy we're still seeing Kuramoto in Rizin. When he was in that tournament last year, I didn't know if he was going to stick around after or what the deal was. But he's clearly made a home for himself here in Rizin. He's riding the momentum of that last fight, that finish he had. I really do like this matchup, and I don't know. I feel like I've always been a little more bearish on Kintaro than most people. I think that he loses to a lot of the bigger fights and wins a lot of the smaller fights, and that's just sort of how he's always been. A bit of a 50-50 fighter when you look at his record. So I do think Kuramoto is going to pull away with a win here. But I just in general, the theme that I've had with this entire card, you guys have seen me on the show before, and there's a lot of cards where I've been very confident in all my picks. This is a card where I think there's a lot of really close matchups, and again, this is another one of those, but I would have to go with Kuramoto.
We have seen Kintaro's weakness has always been people who grapple. And if you saw the Motoya fight, that's basically what happened between him and Yuki Motoya. He did get outstruck by Naoki Inoue when they fought, but Inoue basically targeted Kintaro's leg to slow him down. So Chris, I asked, do you think we're going to see Kuramoto continue on his path upward, or is Kintaro going to I think this will be his third consecutive loss if he loses his fights.
I mean, we've seen Kintaro get highlight reel knockouts so much so that they even made a guy that you know too well, Chiseled Adonis, go crazy and apoplectic. But still, though, I don't think we're going to see Kintaro take another loss from this point forward. I'm not trying to state anything, but I think that when it comes down to Kuramoto, he probably might have his work cut out for him.
Mm-hmm. So you think that Kintaro will win this?
Yes, I do.
You think he'll be able to knock out Kuramoto? Kuramoto's got a strong shin. That fight he had with Yamaniha?
Dude, possibly.
Jack, I apologize. Did you give a prediction?
I said Kuramoto's going to win. Kintaro's finished a lot of fights before, but it's worth noting, last 4 fights he hasn't gotten a finish. He's lost 3 of those fights. I don't think he is in a good spot right now, and I think that I'm more confident than Kuramoto can get a win here.
Have you seen how popular Kintaro is, Jack? Have you seen like social media or I don't know, ever been if Shingo's ever told you like about how popular of a fighter Kintaro is?
Well, it seems like he's one of those fighters. He's from Osaka, correct?
Yeah.
They're very supportive of a lot of their hometown fighters, as you know. And he's just one of those guys where they show out for him, So what I can really appreciate about Osaka fighters and their fans is that they're very supportive through the thick and thin. That we know about how Koji has basically only lost since he's joined Rizin. But it hasn't felt like a single bit like his support has waned at all. You know, same thing with Kintaro. I can only imagine that his support has stayed exactly the same through his more unfortunate results recently. It is surprising though that he has such a loyal fan base. No, and that's not meant to be a backhanded compliment, but it's just meant to be a testament to how he has a really strong support compared to a lot of guys on the roster.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, those Osaka fans, they stick with you thick and thin. You know, it's not like the Brazilian fans. You know, you lose and then suddenly they turn on you and riot when you lose. Well, here's the other thing as well. Do you think so? Okay, so if Kintaro loses this one, so this would be his third consecutive loss he loses. What do you think this puts him in the standing for in Rizin, despite being one of their most popular fighters? It's a weird conundrum because despite I don't think he'll lose any popularity, like you said, with his crowd, but like what do you do with a fighter who's popular? Do you put him on a big spot again, co-maining, or main eventing an Osaka show? Like, what would you do in that case if he becomes 0-3?
Well, I mean, he puts on close fights. The ones that he loses aren't dominant, one-sided outcomes. So, I mean, I think he's going to come back, win or loss in this situation. So I'm not worried about that personally. I just would be interested to see what type of opponent they would give him after a fight like this.
Now, here's my other issue. Unfortunately, I think that Kintaro is going to be at a disadvantage because my theory is that whenever tattooed Osaka fighters fight in Osaka, they have plus 10 health and plus 10 endurance. Unfortunately, this fight's not going to be Osaka, so he's not going to have those passive stat abilities in this fight, Kintaro. And so I definitely think Kuramoto is going to basically dominate for 3 rounds. I don't know if he can finish a guy like Kintaro, but it's definitely going to. Daniel D. Zabecki says, "Try hard, Jim." As one of the top. Yeah. Okay. I know you're joking. But yeah, I think Kuramoto is going to win this. Kuramoto has been on a crazy streak. And I think after that last loss that he had to Yamaniha
that was a fight. That was a fight.
That was an incredible fight. And the way that he dominated Kato, and he's kind of fighting a similar fighter in Kintaro. I think this is an easy win for Kuramoto, and I think he's going to have a very successful 2022. By the way,
you know what? Win or loss, he still has the best beard in Rizin.
The best beard, really?
So, I would say so.
Did you see the thing where he picked up Kato and then slammed him from side control? Was that what did you think about that, Jack? Was that that was so insane? I never saw somebody do that before.
Yeah, no, he's a fun fighter to watch.
Chris, Kuramoto, as you know, he's a German suplex machine. How many suplexes do you think we see in this fight?
I think we're gonna see under 3.
Jack,
is this gonna be like a Brock Lesnar match? Like a Brock Lesnar pro wrestling match where we're going to count every time he suplexes? We're going to go 1, 2.
Yeah, we might have to. Do you have any?
Either that, or if you're trying to play a drinking game, you might want to take a shot.
How many do you think, Jack? Do we get suplexes?
I don't know. I guess 3. I don't know. We need like an over/under stat that we can bet on for this.
Daniel says this will be either a violent bloodbath or boring 15-minute grinding session. And I definitely see, the fight going like that, going either of those two. Hopefully it's a violent bloodbath. That's what I hope for. And so Kuramoto has said that he wants to get at least one German suplex in Rizin because he's actually never gotten one yet in Rizin. So I think we're going to see 2 German suplexes in this fight because he's going to get one for the first and then the second one. So I think we're going to see 2 successful German suplexes. I know, Jack, you did say that Kuramoto has the best beard, but I'm curious to know, do you think that Yusuke Yachi has the best hair?
Best hair? Oh, man. Well, I mean, I think he's got a cool look going. I think his brand has always been a cool thing. I like how in the past he joked about his hair getting in his sight. I think actually this might even be a callback to his first fight against Luis Gustavo. So it's almost like a perfect transition on this podcast.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
I think in jest he said after that fight that in part why he was knocked out was because his hair kept getting in his way.
Exactly. And then my
That to me is the biggest fucking excuse that he could ever make for himself. Oh, I lost because my hair was getting in the way. Bullshit. You got knocked out by a better fighter in Luis Killer Gustavo on that night. And here we are 2 years later, even though Gustavo lost in the Rizin Lightweight Grand Prix. 2 years later, he's coming back to get another win off Yusuke Yachi and possibly end his career. But still, though, enough talk. It's time for the main event. Luis Killer Gustavo versus Yusuke Yachi in the lightweight division. How about it?
Before we get to that, Daniel says that he hopes that the superior rule set will help a lot to both fighters. I hope it also helps in all the other fights as well. Minus the kickboxing match, of course.
Of course.
Kobe Day says Shrek's hair greater than Yusuke Yachi's hair. Good points. I could definitely agree with that. Daniel says, who has the better tattoos, Kintaro or Hagiwara? Easy answer, Hagiwara. Because
I'm saying Ren has the better tattoos.
Well, because
I mean, come to think of it, isn't Kintaro's tattoos too hot for Japanese TV?
All tattoos are too hot for Japanese TV. But problem with Kintaro's is that it's kind of just like a tribal tattoo, I think. That's so generic. Ren, that's a good one, but he's got so many, and he's like added that face tattoo. I don't like face tattoos. Hagiwara's because he's got the two samurai swords in the back, and that's just like a cool visual design, I think. That's my personal pick. You say Jack, you say Ren's overall.
He's got a cool thing on his hand that looks like it's like a rocket, like it's like fire coming from it. Makes it look pretty cool. It's a cool visual. But he keeps adding to the collection, so he might even get something later which tops everything else he already has.
Jay Krish, any thoughts on better tattoos in Rizin? Best tattoo in Rizin?
Considering the fact that I have no tattoos of my own, I really am in no authority to talk about this. But if I were, I'd say Kintaro has the better set of tattoos for Rizin male fighters, you know.
Actually, going back to hair, you can also make an argument for Ogikubo whenever he like shaves in the back of his head, like is it like I think it's like one of his sponsors or something that he shaves into the back of his head. I mean, that's it. I don't see anybody else doing that.
Yeah, that's dope. I like that.
Come to think of it, he's taken after what Dennis Rodman used to do in the early 90s or what some of these NBA players do nowadays, shaving things into their heads.
Actually, Jack, wasn't there an MMA fighter who's like they shaved their chest hair with one of their sponsors?
I don't know. I mean, that sounds like an MMA thing. Yeah.
I swear to God, I feel like that has happened. If anybody in the chat knows that that's actually happened, please let me know if that's true because I'm 100. This is not a Mandela moment. I'm 100% sure that I think in UFC, some fighter, maybe it was Bellator, shaved their sponsor into their chest hair or something like that. Kobe Day says Pee Wee Herman was before Jack's time. Is that true, Jack? Is Pee Wee Herman?
No, it's not. What? I watched a fair share of Pee Wee Herman.
Okay, movies, TV show, both.
Yeah, I guess it was TV show. It was on DVD, so.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So you didn't watch it when it was on TV, like probably.
No, okay. So I guess yeah.
Okay. Chris,
of course, Andrew, you watched it when it was on TV the first time. Obviously, I watched it when it was on Adult Swim.
Okay, yeah. Well, I remember. Yeah, I remember watching it as a kid.
Yeah, but still, enough chit chat. Let's get back to the topic. Let's get back to the main event, the rematch: Luis Gustavo versus Yusuke Yachi. Yusuke wants to try and not get knocked the fuck out like he did last time. Thoughts?
Jack, so I know you talked to Yachi during his Yachi 2.0 phase. He was successful until he fought Satoshi and got dominated. Pretty soundly, no ifs, ands, or buts. Probably worse domination than the first fight, in my personal opinion. Do we see Yachi 3.0 in this fight? Also, sorry, go ahead.
Well, one thing I found interesting is that heading into that fight on New Year's Eve, I sort of wrote him off unfairly, but maybe it was fair, but I sort of wrote him off in that fight, and I thought he was going to lose, and he did. So the question I kept asking myself was, okay, well, what's next for him after this fight? What are they going to do once his trail of this 2.0 start to finish to get a title shot is over? And I think that this is really one of the most interesting fights you can make for him right now, because this is, he proved last year that he can come back from his slump and he can work his way to a title fight, but he hasn't proved that the person who basically started his entire skid in Rizin, if he can avenge that loss. What I think I wrote this in a letter before, so a newsletter before, so I don't mean to reiterate things, but I think I've said before that what's a better way to show that you've improved than to get back the first loss you took in Rizin? And he can do that this weekend. So I really do like this matchup. I think that if there's anything that's interesting about it besides the Yachi perspective of it, it's that Gustavo has been out of action this entire time, so we don't know what that's going to be like. Yachi could be facing the same Gustavo he fought last time, or he could face a Gustavo who has been in the workshop for 2 years and changing things and becoming a much better fighter. So it's going to be interesting to see. Yachi 3.0, that could definitely happen. I still personally believe that this is part of the sequel, that this is part of his proving that he's a different fighter than how he was before.
I'm gonna have to turn in my MMA fan card because I don't know why I didn't even think about it. Kome Day says Dave Pee Wee Herman. That's who he was talking about. Was a UFC heavyweight the sponsor tan or hair shave of the sponsor? I thought he was talking about Pee Wee Herman, the TV show. And
I thought I was getting heckled.
What was that? Sorry?
I thought I was getting heckled.
Oh no. I didn't even occur to me that it was Dave Herman he was talking about. So I got to turn in my MMA fan card. No, this is a very interesting fight. There's so many. This entire fight is just one big story. You gave a bunch of it. Other things that they're both coming off losses, which is interesting. You're main eventing a show with two fighters who lost in their got finished in their last matches that they had. Jay Chris, I know that Yachi, it wasn't. I don't think he was saying it as an excuse. More like that's he wasn't discounting the loss so much that to the hair, but just more that like it was a stupid mistake on my part that helped me lose faster. So, but barring that,
I also think to an extent he wasn't being serious. I think he was joking around.
I think so too. But Jay Chris, what do you think? Does Yachi have a chance in this fight against the guy who and also I want to also point out that Gustavo was beating him pretty soundly in the first fight. It's on YouTube. You can go watch it. Or do you think Yachi has a chance to avenge that loss, or is we going to see Killer Gustavo come in and take another body?
I think we're going to see Killer Gustavo take another body. I just don't think. Because here's the thing. If the dude got knocked out in devastating fashion the first time, what makes you think he's going to try and do anything to overcome a second ass whooping? I just don't think that Yusuke Yachi, I hate to say that the former PXC lightweight champion is a washout, which he isn't, but I do not think that he's going to win this particular fight. And if he does lose this fight again via knockout, I think that he's going to be left thinking about or pondering what his next career might be. But, for all gets and shiggles aside, let's just hope that Yachi actually makes this fight competitive compared to the last time out, because he did get knocked out in like the first round or first 2 rounds, I think. First fight.
Second round. Well, you mean against Gustavo, you mean, right?
Yeah. And it's like y'all said, both of these fighters are coming off losses, But in the case of Gustavo, he's coming off time away from the ring or away from the cage because he basically, obviously, hasn't been able to get into Japan. He's been, trying to fight. What am I trying to say? He's basically been sidelined from the pandemic because of the pandemic, just like the entirety of the world, including us.
Mm-hmm. Daniel has a great question. I'll throw it to you, Jack. What do you think from the perspective of time? How different a fighter, how different of a fighter black version of Yachi is versus the yellow one?
Wait, what's the different versions? I'm confused.
What do you think from the perspective of time? How different a fighter yellow Yachi, yellow trunks Yachi versus?
Oh, okay, I see. Well, what's interesting here is that Yachi has, in his sequel, adopted a bit more of a conservative fighting style. And I think the results show that's for the better, that he's been able to turn things around. So that in itself makes this a different fight from how it was the first time. So Gustavo, he's going to be fighting a different Yachi in that case. I think that's a huge thing to consider. But I also want to stress, what if Gustavo had his own sequel and we just didn't see it because he's been trapped outside Japan this entire time? He could be a reinvented fighter in the same way that Yachi has been in that time.
Now, it's interesting that you say conservative because I was going to say, yeah, yellow Yachi was kind of like aggressive, like a jumping bean, all like very, very. I would almost say like a kid who's hyper, like moving around, jumping around, very, very fan friendly, definitely type of style. Sometimes to his a positive performance, sometimes to a negative performance. But can you be conservative with a guy like Gustavo, who's the complete opposite of a fighter? Gustavo, there's a reason why he's called killer, because he's aggressive, he's in your face. He's a violent guy.
Isn't he trained by Wanderlei Silva?
That too as well. He's also trained by Wanderlei Silva. I don't know if he still trains with Wanderlei Silva, but at one point he was. And if you want to talk about aggressive, Silva might be the king of aggressive brawling MMA style. So Jack, what do you think? Can Yachi afford to be conservative with a guy like Gustavo?
Absolutely. I think that the counter to an aggressive style is almost one of the oldest styles you can have in combat sport. Let him tire himself out. Pick him apart when he's in between these jolts of energy that's being thrown at you. If you have the composure to not be as wild against your opponent, that could easily give you the fight. Of course, that's not to say that that's how it plays out. These are easier said than done things. But could a less willing to engage Yachi cause problems for Gustavo, someone who arguably thrives off of fighting an aggressive opponent? Absolutely, I would say that, yeah.
Well, because here's the other thing I'm going to bring up as well. It's a fight that a lot of people, that I had to actually remind myself that happened. Gustavo and Mikuru, and that's how Mikuru fought against Gustavo and beat him. Was a very conservative, kind of slow, methodical approach to Gustavo, and then wore Gustavo down, and he was basically able to win that way. I suggest people, go back and look at that fight. But I mean, Jay Krish, I mean, if you see, what advice would you give to Yachi to get that win back, to get a win in this fight against Gustavo? Would it be to fight conservatively, or is it kind of, does he have to throw the baby out of the bathwater, as the saying goes? Does he just kind of have to go back to old Yachi and he has to match Gustavo's aggressiveness?
I think he would have to channel his inner self. He would have to channel back to that old Yusuke Yachi. But the main thing that I would say to Yusuke Yachi is to do what you can to not get knocked out like you did the first time. Mm-hmm. And as far as, him actually making this a competitive fight, don't try and fight Gustavo's fight, That's what cost you the last time.
Here's the other thing as well, and Jack, I want to know if this is a factor you think they could play in. First fight they had was in a ring. This is in a cage. Think this will have any sort of that could play a difference in this fight?
I think it's a fun thing to consider, but I don't think it really plays too much into it, to be honest. I mean, that's a lame answer, but if I'm being 100% honest with you, I don't see those changes to be too big of a deal.
How about you, Chris? Do you think the cage will be a factor? Could be a deciding or can play an important part in this fight?
It may. I mean, it might play a factor, but then again, you have to realize we are still under the superior epic rule set at Rizin. Anything goes at this point.
Mm-hmm. Jack, if you feel like you can make a prediction, I want to hear what you think. Do we see Yachi, the sequel, get another sequel, or does Gustavo come in and remind everybody, that I'm the killer and I beat Yachi twice?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those fights where there's so much we don't know. But if there's anything, I would say that we could see a bounce back from Yachi here. That maybe this different style he has will just be able to give Gustavo nothing to work with. So I guess if I'm going to do a pick, it would be Yachi, and I would say by decision.
I also want
Good point.
a point as well. The first fight, Gustavo took that on short notice because he replaced another fighter from his camp. I forgot the name. But yeah, Gustavo took that fight on incredibly short notice. And I don't know, having a full camp versus a not full camp, that was, I'm also curious to see what a full camp Gustavo can do. Jay Krish, I'm assuming from the way that you've spoken so far, it sounds like you think that Gustavo is gonna get the win in this.
Hell yeah. But, if Gustavo doesn't knock Yachi out in the first round, and that's my point on this, I think he's going to get a first round knockout. But if not, don't be surprised if this fight goes to full 3 and both of these two are just fighting both of these two are just beating the dog shit out of each other. But if Yachi wins via decision, he's gonna have to fight. He's gonna have to try and avoid fighting Luis's fight, and he's definitely gonna have to avoid not getting knocked out.
Mm-hmm. Listen, listen. I have nothing against Yachi. Yachi's been, been one of my favorites in Rizin since his debut. One of the most exciting fighters for a while. His fighting style now is completely not. I'm not a fan of, but that doesn't still take away the fact that it's helped him win. At least up until he had the title shots against Souza. But I just don't see what Yachi can do other than that Gustavo is not going to be prepared for. If I think in striking, Yachi can't strike with a guy like Gustavo, because if he gets caught, I think it's a short night for him. If the only way that I see him is really it's kind of like if Yachi kind of just holds Gustavo against the cage and kind of maybe has to do some lame prey on Gustavo. Take advantage of the fact that that his miles in MMA took a break. But listen, I'm also going back by how that first fight went, and Gustavo has basically obliterated almost everybody that he's fought in Rizin and previous. I have to pick Gustavo. That's how I think about it. Jack, for this show, Rizin Trigger the Third. Curious to know, what are 2 fights that you are looking forward to the most?
Well, I think the main event makes this show. I think that out of all these fights, if there's one, like, it's just obvious which fight has to be the main event on this one. And it's this fight because not only is it a good match to make, there's the storytelling behind it, there's the marketability behind it. So that's certainly number 1 in my book. If I have to pick another one, I'm I'm looking at the card here. I really do like that matchup between Watanabe and Sudo. I think that it's just the perfect veteran versus up and comer type fight. And if really it's one of those ones where I just don't know how it's going to play out, and I'm really intrigued to see how it does. But looking at this card overall, there's apart from that heavyweight fight, which is kind of confusing, but that's sort of part of the territory when someone's debuting with not a real with a background in sumo instead of a different combat sport. But when you look at this entire card, there's a lot of great matchups and a lot of really close matchups on paper. So overall, I think that this is probably, well, I would just go out and say this is the best trigger card out of the three so far.
Jay Krish?
You know what? I think you need to reiterate a bit more, Andrew.
Sorry?
You should probably ask, what are the two fights you're most looking forward to outside the main event? Because if you're watching a Rizin card and you're not focused or entirely focused on the main event, you must need to get re-examined.
No, I think MMA has MMA is unique where sometimes the main event is either such a mismatch or something I'm not invested in for whatever reason. Same thing happens with Bellator or UFC. There are just some fights that are on the undercard. I think, Jack, you could definitely agree that sometimes like the main event, sometimes for any promotion can sometimes just not be something you're connected to. Am I right?
Yeah, sometimes it's the biggest fight on paper, but sometimes there's just not that interest matched from viewers or something like that, or it's the other way around, that it's a matchup that people are interested in but doesn't really make sense on paper. I mean, but if you were to pick, if I had to pick another fight on this card, I guess just the sort of almost messed up weird factor of that fight where we have Taka Kenshin debuting. I'm just interested to see how that plays out, because these things, none of us can say how it's going to go, and we can only really fairly comment on it after it's happened. So I'm interested to see how that plays out.
True.
I'll give an example of a main event that I didn't care about. Satoshi and Yachi, actually, because I knew that Satoshi was going to dominate the second time around in the final fights. So that was a main event I didn't care about, because I even on the show I was like, it's Satoshi's going to just dominate Yachi for however long he's going to. That's what happened. Sorry, Jay Krish, go ahead.
True. But obviously, if there were two fights from this card that I would be focused on outside of the main event, obviously everybody should be looking forward to Gustavo versus Yachi. But if there were two fights from this card that I would say I'm interested in, it's Taka Kenshin versus Hideki Shrektsukine. And obviously, most definitely, the first fight on that card, Grant Bogdanow versus Takashi Izumi, because we all want to see how Bogdanow does in his third MMA fight, especially, Andrew, considering the fact that we both talked to Grant on now numerous occasions. This dude is pretty much going to be a star in the making on both sides of the Pacific if he keeps doing what he's doing.
Mm-hmm. Daniel says he thinks the two main fights, and also he's looking forward to Kanehara versus Majima and the returns of Soya and Bogdanov.
And you don't have to kind of think of it, for those of y'all that are still watching in the comment section of this video, feel free to get at us on Twitter, at ChrisGary92, at ABenja1, at Jack Wannan, or at Knockdown News. And, let us know before these fights happen on Saturday, what are the fights that you're that you're most looking forward to?
I guess if I had to pick two besides the main, of course, Taka Kenshin versus Shrek, just because it's a heavyweight match.
Of course you are.
And also Sudo versus Watanabe. I think I'm really intrigued by, presuming that the fight goes away, if it becomes an exciting, almost like not an MMA match, but a jiu-jitsu match, that's going to be kind of like, I think that'll definitely be the best type of match it could be.
Of course. But still, though, all in all, regardless, these fights and the fights on the following night are going to be the main reason why you, the viewer or the listener, are going to want to check out Rizin Trigger the Third and Rizin 35 from the Musashino Forest Sports Plaza in Choku, Tokyo, Japan. The events will start at 1 a.m. Eastern Time, 10 p.m. Pacific, live on Live Now Global. If you got the Live Now app, good. If not, download it. It's available on iOS, Android, or wherever you need to get it from any smart device there is. And also, when it comes down to these cards, $25 for each individually, $30 for the bundle. Don't miss out on that as well. And Andrew, do you want to say something before continuing these plugs?
Oh, well, yes, Jack. I want to give you an opportunity to plug everything you're doing for Knockdown News, anything, and all MMA stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, I run a site, knockdownnews.com. If you want to follow that, you can follow Knockdown News on Twitter or go to the website, knockdownnews.com. There's also a newsletter for that 6 days a week. I do email updates for the latest MMA news. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Jack Wannan on Twitter, JCKWANNAN. And I guess that's all I have to plug. Thanks again, guys, for having me on. It's always great to chat about Rizin with you guys.
Yes, and thank you for all you do. And yeah, by the way, as well, everybody that wants to see something Rizin related, Jack, you talked to Seiki Izawa. A great write up on her rise to Rizin 35 in her title fight. So yeah, congratulations on that, by the way, again.
Oh,
I'll just congratulate you on the Izawa.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, no. If you guys want to check that out, that's online. I appreciate that though. That's definitely one of the more intriguing fights of the weekend. Her title fight on Rizin 35.
Yes.
Okay, 35. I lost track after 32 for some reason. I kept calling 34, 33, and then anyway.
But Chris, you want to take us out?
Yes, I might as well. You know, like Jack said, check him out on Twitter at Jack Wannan and check out his site, knockdownnews.com, for more intriguing articles about your favorite fighters or your favorite fights. As far as Andrew goes, you can check him out on Twitter at abenja1. That's ABENJA, the number 1. Or obviously check out his articles through MMAsucker.com, or you know what? Check him out on Instagram. He's way more intriguing there. Right?
Oh, yes, of course.
I mean, come on, dude. You enjoy posting all those damn BJJ session pics on Instagram, don't you?
Yeah.
Of course. But still, though, y'all can follow me on Twitter at ChrisGary92. Y'all can follow me on Instagram at ChristianGary92. Oh, and while I'm basically on this podcast, y'all can also check out the latest episode of Focus Fights Audio, where I posted a whole shit ton of WrestleMania week interviews. It's currently available on Anchor.fm, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, which we are finally on now. And hopefully this podcast will be on down the line, and Google Podcast or your RSS feed. You won't miss what I had to say to some of these interviewees. It was a fun thing that I did, and I hope not to do any more 2-hour or more. Not to do any more 2-hour and 30-minute episodes of the Focus Fights Audio podcast, but it was enjoyable. Believe you me. Still, though, if you want to check out more about us, first of all, subscribe to our YouTube channel for more exciting content. Subscribe to the Focus Spice YouTube channel for exciting content. Subscribe to, what am I trying to say? Follow us on Twitter at We Are Rising Pod. That's WeAreRizinPod, all in one word. And if you want to check out the podcast that we haven't updated in 7 months, you can check us out on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and you can check us out on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. But still, though, for Jack Wannan, Andrew Benjamin, I'm the Chillmeister, Chris Gary, saying peace, my peoples, in one love world. Protect yourself at all times, and remember, just like the legendary Lenny Hart always likes to say, and we out.